Today's video is going to be a little bit different than usual. I stole an idea from Valuetainment because I liked the title. But first, hi, I'm Zach. I've been running a marketing agency for the last 7 years in which we've generated over $13 million in revenue for our clients. Like I said, I stole this idea from Valuetainment, but I didn't watch the video. I just looked at the title and I liked the idea, so this is still somewhat original. So I don't actually know what points that Patrick Bet-David used. I'm sure they were great. His was probably better than mine, but anyways, let's get into it because I like this idea. If we think about Steve Jobs, it's pretty crazy, right? How prolific he is, how well known he is, how big the company turned out to be, all the drama behind how he was kicked out of Apple and then was able to go back to Apple after the startup that he made was then bought by them and whatnot, unless I'm getting something mixed up with that. But every time anybody thinks of the name Steve Jobs, they think of this revolutionary thinker, groundbreaking, so intelligent, somewhat hard to work with, but he's going to push you to greatness. The reality distortion field that they talk about, where being in close proximity to Steve Jobs, you would begin to think that anything was possible, which I would argue is kind of a good thing because then it's going to push you beyond your limiting beliefs. So if we think of this type of person who was a bit abrasive, a little bit hard to work with, kind of hardcore creative, right? This type of a person, was he definitely a great thinker and revolutionary? Yes, like by definition, right? But was he a better CEO than Tim Cook? That's a very interesting question, and I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. And the reason why I think this is so interesting is because, to me, it's not necessarily that one is a better company founder than the other, but I think they're just so different in their temperament and how Steve was as a person and how Tim Cook is as a person. But when it comes to the CEO role, I think depending on the scale of the company, it could kind of swap between the two. For present day Apple, I think the answer is Tim Cook. If it's early days Apple, I think the answer is probably Steve Jobs. Why would I say this? How is it possible that anybody could be better at running Apple than Steve Jobs himself, who made it what it is today? Well, if we think about what it is to run a public company and all of the responsibilities that come with that, all the work that needs to be done, all the PR, all of that, it seems to be that the majority of these public CEOs are not that abrasive character. They are quite polished and by the book, organized. And if we think of the two different pictures of Steve Jobs and Tim Cook, which one fits that a little bit more accurately? Well, it's probably Tim Cook, right? Here's my thought as to why I would pick Tim Cook for today's Apple. Well, Steve Jobs was the revolutionary. He's the one who came up with the amazing ideas and pushed engineers to come up with just groundbreaking technology that they didn't even know would appeal. He was able to predict what users would want before they even knew that they wanted it. And he was able to do this with the Mac as well as the iPhone and the iPad and so on, right? But Tim Cook took over this monolith of a company from after Steve Jobs was going to die. Now imagine inheriting the baby of somebody that everybody holds as a revolutionary thinker. Like, you are just a guy who's just been a great executive for a very long time, but now they say, oh, you're going to take over for one of the most well-known CEOs that has ever existed. Well, now you have to be a whole other level of not just stable in your mindset, but just stable in your ability, right? Because at that time, and I'm going to double check this, when Steve Jobs announced his resignation because of his health issues, it knocked $10 billion off of Apple's stock value. At the time, it was only worth around $356 to $360 billion. To put that into perspective, it's worth over $3.25 trillion today. So the majority of Apple's value or market cap has been made under Tim Cook's watch. So think of the type of person it must take to inherit the work of this revolutionary thinker and then not just, take over the ship in this massive storm, dealing with all that pressure, all that stress, all the infrastructure, but then not just keeping it at the same level, but 10xing it. It's quite insane, really, to think about. The phrase, like, you have some big shoes to fill. Imagine the thoughts that must have been going through Tim Cook's mind when he was finally realizing that this is something that he would actually have to do. And I wonder what must go through his mind nowadays when he sees how far the company has come. I mean, Steve Jobs is the type of person where you could probably make an Instagram profile just posting quotes from him and get a large following from that if you made them nice looking enough. People write books about him. People who don't even read the book will have his book sitting on their bookshelf just to say that they have that book because they're that interested in being associated with his brand, which I think is just amazing. But all that being said, I think that kind of answers the question, in my head at least. I think that for getting off the ground, a Steve Jobs type of person is just absolutely required. But I think there couldn't have been a better pick for CEO to take over for someone as amazing as Steve Jobs was. But I'd be really curious to hear what you guys think. So if you like topics like this or you hate topics like this, please let me know either way in the comments, because I just really like talking business. If you do too, please go ahead and subscribe. But that's all for today. Thank you.